Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping into a big idea from Peter Scazzero's book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And it all starts with a question that, let's be honest, many of us have probably thought about, even if we haven't said it out loud. So this question was actually asked to the author by someone new at his church. And it's a bit provocative, right? It's kind of the uncomfortable launch pad for the whole book because it just cuts right to the heart of a problem so many of us have seen, or maybe even felt ourselves. So where does that disconnect come from? Well, the book's big argument is that the answer isn't about doing more, just trying harder. Nope. The real solution, it says, is found when we go beneath the surface, into those huge, hidden parts of our inner lives that, most of the time, we just ignore. And to help us get our heads around this, Scazzero uses this really powerful metaphor that just makes everything click. He calls it the spiritual iceberg. Okay, so you know how an iceberg works, right? Only a tiny little piece of it, maybe 10%, is actually sticking out of the water. Well, in this analogy, that 10% is everything people can see about our spiritual lives. And that's usually what we focus on, isn't it? The stuff we do. The church services, the small groups, the volunteering. And look, those are all good things. But the point is, they are just the very, very tip of who we really are. Because the real deal, the massive driving force of the iceberg, is that huge 90% that's hidden under the water. And that represents our inner world, our emotional lives that so often go completely untouched. And this is where the real work is. We're talking about things like our insecurities and fears, the baggage from our past that still makes us react a certain way, all those false beliefs we carry around. This stuff has so much power, and our typical spiritual activities, they often don't even touch it. So what happens when we ignore that giant 90%? Well, eventually, what's inside starts to leak out. It's why sociologists like Ron Sider point to this kind of shocking statistic. There's often very little difference in the actual day-to-day behavior of Christians and non-Christians. And the reason is simple. Real, deep change just hasn't gotten below the surface. Okay, so if that's the problem, how do we even begin to explore that hidden 90%? The book says we have to start by going way back to the single most influential group we'll ever be a part of, our family. Think about it. Every family has these unspoken rules, right? These commandments about how life works. Maybe you learned, don't ever get angry, or conflict is bad, just keep the peace. We just absorb these things without even realizing it, and they become like the default operating system running in the background of our adult lives. And because of those rules, we often build what the book calls a false self. It's basically the mask we put on to get by, to feel accepted, to feel safe. This is the part of us that thinks my value comes from what I do, what I own, or what people think of me. And all the while, it's covering up our true self, the authentic person God actually made us to be. So the big question is, how do we get out from under that false self? Well, the book suggests that for a lot of us, it takes something pretty dramatic. It means hitting what's called the wall. Now, we're not just talking about a bad day here. The wall's a real crisis. It could be burnout, a major loss, a moment where your faith just feels empty. It's this moment where all our old ways of coping, our whole false self system, just crumbles and we realize, wow, this is not working anymore. And you can often see a pattern in this journey. We start out super enthusiastic, right? We learn the ropes, we get really busy doing things for God, and then bam, we hit the wall. And it's that crisis that finally forces us to stop looking at all the external stuff and start the real necessary journey inward. So once you've hit the wall, getting through it isn't about just trying harder at the same old things. It's about a total shift. It's about learning a whole new set of skills for how to be a person and how to relate to God. And one of the biggest new skills is something really ancient, the Sabbath. And we're talking about way more than just taking a day off. It's actually this revolutionary act of trust. When we intentionally stop everything, our work, our striving, we're basically saying, God's in control, not me. It's this rhythm that teaches us how to actually rest, to delight in life, and just be. Another huge one is a skill called differentiation. It sounds a little technical, but it's really simple. It's the ability to be your own person while still being close to other people. It means you can hold on to your own beliefs and feelings without getting swept up in everyone else's drama or expectations. Like, you can say no to someone you love without feeling like you're a terrible person, or you can listen to a friend's anxiety without letting it become your anxiety. It's a game changer. And what this all boils down to, really, is growing up. It's about moving from being an emotional child to becoming an emotional adult. An emotional child blames everyone else, complains, and just unravels when things get stressful. But an emotional adult, they take responsibility. They can stay calm under pressure. They can handle things.
Okay, so let's pause. We've talked about all this really hard inner work, digging into your past, hitting the wall, learning all these new skills. What's the point of it all? What's the goal?
And the answer is actually really simple, but also incredibly profound. The goal is not to become some kind of spiritual superstar or a perfect Christian. The goal is simply to become your true self, the authentic, free, whole person you were created to be, living in a real, loving relationship with God.
And this has huge implications for how we treat other people. The book basically asks, how can you genuinely love your neighbor if you don't even know or love your own true self? The argument is, you just can't. Our ability to love others well flows directly from the hard work of loving ourselves as God does. You just can't give away something you don't have.
And that brings us to this final thought, a really powerful quote from a Hasidic rabbi named Zuzia that just perfectly sums up this whole journey. The idea is that at the end of it all, the question won't be, why weren't you more like Moses or some other spiritual giant? The real question will be, why weren't you fully and authentically you? Did you have the courage to become the unique person you are made to be? And that's something worth thinking about.